Well, that's
Here
a
you
beanie.
go, Fred. I'll let you do the honors.
There's a hat in it.
Oh, that actually looks pretty good.
Yeah, it does.
Wow.
You guys ready to weigh this up?
Yep.
When Freddy and Juan first stepped onto this mining claim, it didn't scream gold. It barely whispered it. Every run delivered just 0.2 ounces. Not enough to pay for diesel, not enough to feed a family, and nowhere near enough to justify the $120,000 already buried in the mud. Most people would have walked away. But 6 weeks later, everything flipped. That same ground exploded with 13.5 ounces in a single 4-hour run. A $25,000 morning from a mine that was supposed to be dead. This is the true story of how Freddy and Juan turned a money-bleeding disaster into a gold-producing monster, and how what they uncovered didn't just change a mine. It rewrote one family's future forever. And trust me, what happened next shocked everyone. Before we go further, make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this don't come around often. And you won't want to miss what this mine revealed next. The morning Freddy and Juan arrived, thick fog clung to the valley like a funeral veil. The air was heavy, with damp soil and diesel exhaust. The exact smell Anthony Marsh had breathed every day for the past 3 years. His wash plant sat abandoned in a muddy clearing, rust creeping across steel that was supposed to make him rich. Instead, it had emptied his accounts and fractured his family. The camp told the story without words. A worn canvas tent was his home most of the year. A propane heater he barely used because fuel costs were crushing. No power, no running water. A shower meant a 40-minute drive into town. Pinned inside the tent flap, edges curled and faded, was a photograph. Rachel, his wife, and their 2 sons, Marcus and Tyler. Smiling, hopeful, taken back when they still believed this dream would pay off. Before promises started breaking, before gold took everything. Rachel stopped coming months earlier. The last time she visited, it was 2 a.m. She found Anthony under a flashlight, grease-stained, desperately trying to revive a dead engine. She watched silently before asking the question that haunted him every night afterward. When is enough enough? He never answered. He still couldn't. Marcus was 13 now, only 10 when Anthony bought this claim using money meant for college, for their future. 3 birthdays missed, 3 Christmases cut short, 3 years of watching his mother pretend things were fine. Tyler, just 9, had stopped asking when his dad would come home. He'd learned not to trust the answer. When Freddy asked how much gold Anthony produced last season, Anthony stared at the ground. About 20 grams. That was roughly $1,200 earned from a full year of brutal labor, $120,000 in equipment, and everything his family had given up. This season, his break-even goal was 40 ounces. So what was really on the line? "My wife brought our last savings up here," Anthony said. "I've got $2,000 left. That's it. I'm drowning." All he wanted was proof. Proof for Rachel that this sacrifice hadn't destroyed their family for nothing. Freddy and Juan exchanged a glance. 40 ounces meant producing 50 times more gold than last year. It meant succeeding where Anthony had failed for 3 straight years. It meant a miracle. They decided to run a 4-hour test. The plant groaned awake, fighting itself as if it already knew the result. Anthony fed material through the tired system, while Rachel's words echoed in his mind like a hammer. When cleanup time came, everyone crowded around the scale. The fog had lifted, sunlight spilling into the clearing. But Anthony felt colder than ever. One number would decide everything. Juan tipped the concentrate into the pan. A faint yellow streak appeared, barely visible. A whisper where there should have been a roar, 0.2 ounces. Silence hit like a physical blow. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sounds were the ticking engine and the distant creak. Anthony's arms fell limp at his sides. His expression didn't show anger or heartbreak. Something worse, the face of a man who had finally stopped believing. That amount didn't even cover operating costs. That night, Anthony retreated to his tent. Freddy stood at the edge of the clearing, staring out beneath a sky exploding with stars. The valley below was dark, untouched, old-growth forest that looked like it hadn't seen a miner in a century. These were the least experienced miners Freddy and Juan had ever tried to help. Anthony's goal wasn't ambitious, it was impossible. But Freddy couldn't stop staring at that forest. What if the problem wasn't just the machinery? What if no one had ever worked the right ground? That man in the tent had lost everything except one last shred of hope. And if there was even a chance, they owed it to him to find out. The next morning, Freddy made an offer that would change everything. They would completely rebuild Anthony's wash plant. New sluice boxes, a new feed system, a full overhaul from the ground up. And if they couldn't at least double his gold recovery, Anthony wouldn't owe them a dime. Materials only. Double or nothing. Two strangers risking their reputation on a miner who couldn't fill a thimble with gold. Anthony didn't understand it. Everyone else had walked away. Suppliers cut credit. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors whispered. Even his own father had written him off, calling the whole thing a waste. But Freddy looked at the tent, the faded family photo, the broken equipment that represented 3 years of sacrifice, and decided Anthony had already paid enough. And because Freddy believed there was gold here no one had ever touched, the rebuild began immediately. Juan dismantled the wash plant piece by piece, exposing years of hidden problems. Freddy vanished into the forest with nothing but a pan and a gut feeling. Corroded pipes, misaligned sluice boxes, a feed system that never worked properly. 4 sharp 90-degree bends, 10 feet of pipe, each one stealing water pressure. Low pressure meant clay stayed stuck to rock. And clay is gold's worst enemy, grabbing fine gold and washing it straight into the tailings. For the first time in years, the real enemy was finally exposed, and the turnaround was just beginning. All that effort, gone. Anthony stood there watching them strip apart 3 years of his life in a single afternoon. Every bolt that hit the ground felt like blame. Every corroded piece was a reminder of how badly he'd failed. While that happened, Freddy pushed deeper into the valley. The forest swallowed him whole. Ancient pines rose like pillars in a cathedral untouched for generations. Moss draped from branches. Ferns blanketed the ground. The air was thick with pine and something else. Promise. If gold existed here, the old miners had never reached it. If this was hydraulicked like I think, Freddy muttered, there's a real chance they left a lot behind, especially in the bedrock. He knelt beside fractured stone, veins and cracks spidering through it. Natural traps, perfect places for heavy gold to hide. Farther downstream, he reached a bend in an ancient channel, rounded stones smoothed by water over thousands of years. This was textbook placer ground, the kind of place gold settles and waits. He scooped up a pan of material and carried it to the creek. Swirl, rinse, swirl again. Black sand settled, and then color. Bright yellow flakes flashed in the afternoon light. There was more gold in that single pan than Anthony had pulled out in months. It wasn't a fortune, but it was proof. It was hope. Back at camp, Juan was welding steel into the new sluice frame. The bars were set at strange angles, uneven spacing, different elevations. To anyone else, it looked chaotic, but nothing was random. They were copying nature. Bedrock holds gold because it's uneven. Cracks, ridges, turbulence points, where water slows and heavies drop out. If one configuration missed a piece of gold, another might grab it. The more variation, the higher the recovery. Late that night, with the camp silent and Anthony asleep, Juan found Freddy sitting alone near the dying fire. Freddy had found gold, real gold, in untouched ground. So why did he look troubled? Because finding gold was easy compared to catching it. If they were wrong, if this rebuild failed, they wouldn't just lose money. They'd give Anthony something far worse. False hope. Hope that he could fix his marriage. Hope that he could be a present father again. And then they'd leave. And he'd be right back where he started. Broke. Alone. That thought was unbearable. They couldn't afford to be wrong. 3 days into the rebuild, everything nearly fell apart. They were lowering the 2,000-pound hopper into place when a chain snapped. The crack echoed like a gunshot. The hopper swung violently. 2,000 pounds of steel suddenly loose. Kelly, their helper, was directly in its path. Juan reacted without thinking. He lunged, grabbed Kelly by the jacket, and yanked him backward, just as the hopper slammed into the support frame. Steel shrieked against steel. For a long moment, no one moved. Kelly's hands shook so badly he couldn't grip his tools. That accident could have killed him. The frame was bent. A mounting bracket had torn clean off. Half a day's work, destroyed in seconds. And time was something they didn't have. Double or nothing. They didn't argue. They reset. Every chain inspected. Every bolt checked. Every connection rebuilt. If they were going to do this, it would be done right, or not at all. The days blurred together. Cutting steel, welding, testing, rebuilding. Every night, Anthony called Rachel. Every night, she asked when he was coming home. Soon, he kept saying, 3 years of soon. On the 5th day, they finished. The wash plant barely resembled what it once was. New steel gleamed inside the old rusted frame. Everything they knew, everything they could do, was now built into it. Tomorrow would decide everything. That night, Anthony called Rachel one last time. The test was in the morning. She told him that if it worked, he needed to bring the boys up this summer. Let them see what their father had been fighting for. And if it didn't, he'd come home, and they'd figure out what came next. Dawn arrived cold and grey. Mist drifted off the creek like spirits lifting away. Anthony hadn't slept. He'd spent the night staring at the photograph of Rachel and the boys, memorizing their faces, bracing himself for the outcome. This was it. 3 years of sacrifice came down to one moment. They fired up the plant. The engine roared, stronger, steadier than ever. Water surged through the new plumbing, blasting from the spray bars with a force Anthony had never achieved before. Material flowed cleanly. No clogs, no jams. For the first time in 3 years, the wash plant worked the way it was supposed to. And the difference was instant. The wash was cleaner. Rocks tumbled freely. Fine material washed through the trommel exactly as designed. Everything moved smoothly toward the sluice boxes instead of choking the system. Anthony stared in disbelief. Same frame, same machine. Completely different performance. For 20 flawless minutes, it ran perfectly. Then water spilled over Juan's splitter, the custom 3-way piece he'd designed from scratch. Gold-bearing slurry was washing straight into the tailings. They were losing gold. Juan sprinted, grabbed a scrap piece of plywood, and jammed together a makeshift cap in seconds, forcing the flow back where it belonged. It held. They kept running. 2 hours in, they'd processed more material than Anthony used to move in an entire month. The sluice boxes filled with concentrate that actually looked promising. The bet still loomed. Double or nothing. At 4 hours, Freddy called it. The cleanup pan glittered with more gold than Anthony had seen in years. Bright flakes scattered through black sand like stars in the night sky. But this was only the rebuilt plant, still running on old ground. The real test was coming. Tomorrow, they'd move into the untouched valley Freddy had discovered. Tomorrow, they'd find out the truth. Anthony had carved a road through dense forest into Freddy's valley. Days of work with the excavator, forcing through brush and trees that hadn't been disturbed in over 100 years. And what waited at the end of that road would change everything. Branches cracked, trees groaned as they tipped and fell. Slowly, deliberately, a road appeared where there had never been one. Anthony peeled back the overburden. 2 feet of useless dirt, hiding pay that hadn't been touched since the gold rush. Ground the old-timers had walked straight across, never realizing what lay just beneath their boots. When they started running material, the signs were encouraging. 1/2 ounce one day, 3/4 the next. In a single week, Anthony recovered more gold than he had in entire months before Freddy and Juan ever showed up. But encouragement wasn't enough. Encouragement didn't erase $120,000 in debt. It didn't repair a marriage. It didn't give back 3 lost birthdays. Anthony didn't need hope anymore. He needed certainty. Then came the day everything shifted. Freddy and Juan were nearly 300 meters away, helping another struggling crew, when a video call lit up the screen. Anthony's face filled the frame, and instantly they knew something was different. He was smiling, really smiling. For the first time since they'd met him, his eyes were red, not from exhaustion, but from emotion. Behind him, the crew gathered around the cleanup tray, and it almost seemed to glow. Anthony tilted the camera downward. Gold. Not flakes, not dust. Chunks, thick pieces, heavy nuggets piled so deep they cast shadows over one another. The pan was overflowing, a solid blanket of yellow. More gold than Anthony had ever seen in one place in his life. They'd run 4 hours that day, 13.5 ounces. The words seemed to hang in the air before finally landing. 13.5 ounces, $25,000 in 4 hours. More than Anthony had produced in his first 2 years combined. More than he ever allowed himself to imagine was possible. After that came a 20-ounce day, then multiple 7-ounce days. Everything Freddy and Juan rebuilt was working exactly as intended. The new sluice boxes were trapping fine gold that would have vanished before. The upgraded feed system was chewing through material faster than Anthony thought a wash plant like his ever could. And the ground Freddy had found, it had been there all along. "We've never seen a situation like this," Freddy said. The old-timers were hydraulicking with water cannons. A lot of material just blew past them. Let's hope enough of it stayed in these creeks. It had. The pay was sitting just 100 yards from where Anthony had spent 3 years digging. Ground he'd walked past 1,000 times, never knowing what was hidden beneath the surface. Rachel was bringing the boys up the following week. Marcus asked every day when he could learn to pan. He wanted to work beside his dad. He wanted to understand what this dream really meant. Anthony's father called for the first time in 2 years, and for once, he didn't say it was a waste. For once, he said he was proud. Freddy and Juan hadn't just fixed a wash plant. They repaired a family. Now they actually have a chance to make a living, Freddy said. Before, they weren't even covering their bills. With the right ground and the plant working the way it should, they finally have a real shot. They gave Anthony back something he thought he'd lost forever. Anthony never quit. 3 years of grinding, when everyone told him to walk away. But Freddy and Juan gave him the opportunity, and that made all the difference. Double or nothing. They promised to double his production. They didn't double it. They multiplied it by 20. And the Marsh family wasn't the only one. In Montana, the Komoric family doubled their gold output, saving both their mine and their aviation business. A father and son, estranged for 2 decades, rebuilt their relationship, standing side by side at a sluice box. In the Mojave Desert, the Gretzner crew boosted production by 700%. Material once discarded as worthless turned out to be worth millions, 40,000 tons sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize its value. In Oregon, a miner named Chad finally moved out of the tent he'd lived in for 7 months a year. As gold stacked up on the scale, his best friend whispered, "This is it. This is what we've been fighting for." Standing beside the old furnace ruins at the historic Sumter Dredge, Freddy and Juan reflected on what their work really meant. They give up a lot. Time away from their own families, missed holidays, birthdays spent on the road, nights in trucks and cheap motels instead of their own beds. But the reward is watching lives turn around, seeing the smiles during cleanup, seeing families reunite, seeing dreams that were fading suddenly roar back to life. Nothing compares to that. They don't just repair equipment, they restore futures. Today, Anthony Marsh's mine produces more gold in a week than it once did in an entire year. Marcus spent last summer learning to pan beside his father. Rachel doesn't ask when enough is enough anymore. She already knows. And after 3 long years, Anthony finally gets to say the words he fought for. He's a gold miner. And he made it. The results weren't just good. They weren't just impressive. They were life-changing.